From inside the castle in Owings Mills, Maryland, it is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer here on a Tuesday in June to discuss Ravens mandatory minicamp. We have a lot to discuss. What we want to see from the players on the field today. We are going to be out there in about an hour and a half time to watch the Ravens gather here today. But Jonas, I begin with a simple question. What is a bell cow in its most literal term?
You want the definition that I gave you before we hopped on?
Yes, because I gave you a little bit of time to look it up, because we hear the term bell cow. We wonder how much of a bell cow Derrick Henry's going to be for this offense. We throw around this term. What does it really mean?
Personally, Paul, I'm not in the business of comparing athletes to animals, so I feel a little bit weird. No.
You're the one who called Keaton Mitchell Tiny Horse.
That was off mic, wasn't it? Or it was on
No,
mic?
that was on mic.
That was an SNL reference.
That's still an animal.
But not the way it's rendered in
a
SNL.
CGI, yeah. CGI animal.
Apparently, according to Webster's dictionary, Merriam-Webster's, excuse me, it's a cow that has a bell attached to it as the lead of a pack, so it's easy to identify.
Who were Merriam and Webster? What were their first names?
I don't know.
They were really the bell cow of the dictionary business, I think you could say.
They got in there before Cambridge?
Sure. I feel like Cambridge has to predate Merriam-Webster. But they clearly put enough of an effort in to become the foremost expert when it comes to dictionaries.
I'd like to think that like Cambridge is the old royal monarchy,
right?
And Merriam and Webster are good Americans who helped us become the world power that we did.
Right. No, that's fair. I assume they're American. Do you think that Merriam took the first half of the dictionary and Webster took like M through Z?
Probably, yeah. Although maybe it's not like the first. It's not 13 and 13 because there's not a lot of words with Q. You know what I mean?
Not a lot of words with Q. Yeah, as you get to the end of the alphabet, obviously a lot of words tail off.
Yeah, you know? There's a new HBO show called Phantasmus. Have you ever heard of it?
I haven't.
You know who Julio Torres is?
No, you were so plugged
Spookies?
in.
No. But he did it's a weird show, and there was like a mini sketch inside it when I was watching last night that was talking about how Q was too avant-garde a letter to be as early in the alphabet as it is. Like it should be with X, Y, and Z. You know, it shouldn't be between
it has
P and
been
R.
Pushed up. Yeah. No, I think it signifies a change in the alphabet. Once you get to Q, it's like, all right, we're getting into some weird stuff now. You know, we're gonna start to
but shouldn't that be the X territory? Shouldn't that be XYZ territory?
It's a canary in the coal mine. It's a quinary in the coal mine with the Q. All right, Jonas, should we talk about the Baltimore Ravens?
Let's talk about Queaton Mitchell.
Queat, the number of vowels in that name. All right, let's talk about mandatory minicamp because it is just 3 days long today, tomorrow, and Thursday. This is different from organized team activities, aka OTAs. How?
It's mandatory, bud. That's why you're getting tweets from Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport talking about how Aaron Rodgers is not at Jets minicamp, and it's a big deal because if you're not at minicamp, then you are probably going to get fined. I think it's about $30,000 to $35,000 a day, depending on if that team decides to actually slap you with the fine. Amari Cooper apparently not at minicamp for the Browns today. No indications that the Ravens are going to have any of that kind of absenteeism because not really a lot of guys who are in the market for new deals who didn't show up during OTAs. Brandon Stevens was here.
Mm-hmm.
He's really the biggest name of that group. So maybe we get some weirdness like we did last year with J.K. Dobbins, where he was here, but he wasn't really practicing. It was kind of a hold-in situation because he didn't really feel all that great about his knee, nor did he feel great about playing without a contract extension through that year. So I think it probably will be a relatively drama-free minicamp for John Harbaugh in terms of being asked about those questions or having to face any kind of absences. So it's mandatory. It's built into the CBA. Probably a little bit more action-packed than OTAs. The last week was pretty chill. You know, guys weren't even in helmets, not a lot of full speed reps. So hopefully ramping up today as the last go round before we hit this summer break.
And in terms of guys who will not be participating, who we expect to not participate at least in mandatory minicamp, who tops that list for you in terms of guys that will be out? I mean, I think we can start with Queaton Mitchell, who we know is still recovering from his season-ending injury last season.
Tiny Horse himself is not going to be out there. probably won't be out there for training camp. If you just deduce from John Harbaugh saying that he's not expected to come back until midseason, then it's probably unlikely we see him in July or August. So he's obviously the big name, but that's why bell cow Derrick Henry was brought in. Probably going to be seeing limited reps from David Ojabo, who's obviously still recovering from that torn ACL. Didn't see a lot of Nick Samek, the rookie center, who is returning from that broken fibula that he suffered toward the end of his season at Michigan State. And then we don't really know yet about Adisa Isaac. Don't know about Bo Braid, the former Maryland safety. Both those rookies were limited or basically not playing at all during OTAs because of some minor injuries that they suffered in rookie minicamp. So not a lot of big names, which is good for us, good participation, but obviously a bummer for those guys that they aren't going to be able to get in this one last go around before the summer.
Right. And it is kind of one last go around before we have about a month plus off before training camp starts. So that is when the true off season happens. It's really been shortened down to really a month, and maybe it'll extend itself next year if they work out in the CBA to change the off season schedule, get rid of OTAs in favor of a longer training camp. But I think fans often hear a lot of terms thrown around at them. I had an email sent to me because I referred to OTAs simply as OTAs without spelling out organized team activities from an angry fan. And I understand that because, look, a lot of terms are thrown around this offseason, and I think fans can get confused as to, wait, what is minicamp? What are OTAs? What is training camp? How does all this differ? I think what is unique about mandatory minicamp is that this is the final kind of look at these players before you have a month and a half off, which means that there are a lot of free agents still out there. And we know that Eric DeCosta and this front office like to wait to do a lot of their business and add a lot of players in free agency. And if there are players out there that are telling their agents, I just want to sign somewhere before training camp, well, this evaluation that John Harbaugh, that Eric DeCosta have of the players in-house is kind of their last look before they decide what they need before training camp. They can still sign guys during training camp. Jadeveon Clowney was a training camp signing, but it is a good idea of, okay, here's what we have in-house. Here may be some areas we could add via trade or via free agency before we get into the July training camp.
Yeah, and that's why you're hoping for good, clean fun, no injuries, no
good, clean fun,
no one
family fun
forcing Eric DeCosta to reach into that free agency market, which is kind of bleak at this point. Not a lot of big names.
There's some guys out there. Justin Simmons, safety, still out there,
but they're not going to pay $10 million a year for Justin Simmons.
I don't know if anybody is. That's why he's still out there.
I don't think the Ravens are going to be able to win that bidding war.
Jonas,
what I'm saying.
Why is Emmanuel Ogbah still out there? A guy that we had on our free agency bracket.
Emmanuel Ogbah?
Because I think he would be a great fit for this team. I just can see it.
I don't know.
5.5 sacks last year from Miami.
He's old, and old guys don't like to work out in OTAs and minicamp and training camp.
I'm just saying, a bargain deal maybe another Jadeveon Clowney sitting out there,
or maybe he plays 8 games and has 1 sack.
I mean, sure, but that's why you sign these guys in June and July and not in March.
It's time for the young guys, the young pass rushers on this roster to step up or shut up.
You can do both. Yeah. I think that you can still add to depth. And I think that's what a lot of these guys, these free agents are out there waiting for is one, injuries are going to happen and teams are going to get desperate. And 2, they want to make sure that they're going somewhere where there's a lot of playing time. Mm-hmm. They don't want to be stuck behind developing rookies or developing second-year players or somebody like Odafe Oweh who could be in line for a breakout season, as we'll discuss.
Could be in line for a discussion point today.
Yeah, let's talk about our mini camp watch list.
6-pack.
Some stuff that we want to see during this mini camp. We have 6 items here, 3 each. Jonas, start us off.
This is just catnip for Ravens fans in general, but I want to hear from Lamar Jackson, who's talking not today, but after practice tomorrow, about some general desire or plans for off-season workouts. This has become a charge. This was a charge subject thing more during the Joe Flacco era, when he really wasn't all that involved in getting together these throwing sessions. I think Lamar's been more proactive about it, but we've talked about Rashad Bateman every episode, and we're going to talk about him again. When he did his interview with Glenn Clark Radio last month, he said, Lamar trusts me. I've trained with Lamar. I've worked out with Lamar. But last year we did not have that connection, and that's due to me and my injury. And he wasn't here at minicamp last year. He wasn't able to work out a lot during OTAs. He's healthy now. And I think it's important not just for him, but for these other wide receivers, especially the young guys like Devontez Walker, maybe even Derrick Henry to at least show a willingness to, take a couple days off, spend a weekend somewhere, whether it's Florida, Arizona, maybe just in Owings Mills, and get those reps down. I think of Tom Brady during his Super Bowl season with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This was not during the summer break, but I think in the months before OTAs or minicamp, getting together with his centers, with his wide receiver, with his running backs, and just working out a couple days in a Tampa Bay park. I think of Patrick Mahomes getting together with Rashee Rice and Hollywood Brown and getting those reps in so that they can be ahead of schedule when they get to OTAs, so they can be ahead of schedule when they get to minicamp. And obviously the big impediment to all this is just time and space. Lamar's based in South Florida. Zay's based in South Florida. I think Nelson Aguilar is Tampa, which is like a 4-hour drive from South Florida. You got Mark Andrews and Rashad Bateman, who are more Arizona based. You have Isaiah Likely, who grew up in Boston or the Massachusetts area. I'm not sure where he spends his time. Derrick Henry is based in the Dallas area. So you have a lot of guys in far-flung places, some of them with families to tend to, vacations to go on. That can make getting on that same page difficult. It can make getting everyone together in a good spot also difficult. But you at least want to see that effort. You want to see Lamar kind of make good on what he said after that championship game loss to the Chiefs. He said, we've been waiting all this time, all these moments for an opportunity like this, and we fell short. But I feel like our team is going to build this offseason. We're going to get right, get better, grind, and try to be in this position again. And I think that would be emblematic of that kind of approach.
I like the term catnip because it is something that fans clamor to see. I think it's something that is just an enjoyable experience for fans to see team big time star players bonding together and working outside of the structure of team related activities, going to each other's houses, going on camping trips, throwing in a high school field behind somebody's house. Like that is just a good thing that fans like to see because it shows that the team is on the same page and that they're trying to get on the same page and that they care.
It shows that they care.
Yeah. And I think that that's just as important. Gianna Hahn was on this podcast last week talking about Lamar being at OTAs and why it was important optically that he was here. And I think it's a similar thing. However, how much can be accomplished during June that could not be accomplished in July, once we get to training camp.
Right.
Getting on the same page is going to be important, but I think that can also be done in the structure of a training camp. A quarterback that I want to talk about is not Lamar Jackson, Jonas, and that's Devin Leary, because I have been wailing and gnashing my teeth about the QB2 situation here with Josh Johnson. Devin Leary, you wrote on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months, about how Devin Leary was drafted in the 6th round to be the eventual QB2, because Josh Johnson is 37 years old, and you need somebody to back up Lamar Jackson. Ideally, somebody who is cost controlled for at least a couple of years, and a 6th round quarterback would fit that bill. However, I do want to just set expectations as to what you tend to get with 6th round quarterbacks. The last 11 6th round quarterbacks, Jonas, according to my research: Tanner McKee, Sam Ehlinger, Jake Luton, Jacksonville. I don't even know who that is. Gardner Minshew, Luke Falk, Tanner Lee, Brad Kaya, Nate Sudfeld, Jake Rudock, Brandon Allen, Jeff Driscoll. Not a whole lot of great names out there. You're looking at Gardner Minshew, who really skews this whole thing because he is currently a starter, set to be a starter in Las Vegas. But other than that, you don't even have a QB2 on this list. You have several QB3s, and you have guys who are out of the league entirely. So it is a tall order to ask a 6th round quarterback to do anything, even become a QB2. And there's no guarantee that Devin Leary can do that. I think there's a path for him on this team right now, and the Ravens are certainly setting him up for that, but he has to clean up a lot of his mistakes, and he has to play a whole lot cleaner football than he did in his last year at Kentucky.
Yeah, and he hasn't been very clean during OTAs. It seemed like an interception a day, and that was working against the second and third and fourth string defense.
Keeps the doctor away.
Yeah. So we're not going to overreact to what happens in minicamp.
No, we're going to try not to.
But if he comes out of these 3 days with 6 interceptions and Lamar's at 1 pick, and Josh Johnson is at 1 pick, and Emory Jones is, well, it doesn't really matter with all due respect to Emory Jones, how many he throws, then yeah, we're going to be talking about it more than probably any team is talking about their third string quarterback. This is a weird situation because an inordinate amount of attention will be paid on Leary over training camp because of this QB2, the future designation. And it's going to be interesting to see, if there is a worst case scenario here, it's, none of the backup quarterbacks do a good job in training camp or in the preseason. And then we get to the regular season and Lamar is healthy, but you wonder how much agitation there is in the Ravens front office to maybe go and acquire a better quarterback too. And I think the trouble you run into that is if you try to trade for a good backup quarterback or, a good backup quarterback from a good team, then they're not going to be willing to give them up. Right. But if you try to acquire a good backup quarterback from a bad team, they also might not be willing to give it up easily, because if their backup or if their starter is really struggling, then they want to at least, have someone decent enough to pass the reins on to during those months when they're kind of tanking for draft stock. So you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place there.
Well, the Ravens may have missed their window in terms of that, because we already saw Justin Fields, Kenny Pickett, these guys already traded 2 teams to probably be backups in their location. So I think a lot of teams have already kind of cut bait there, have already moved on and made their decision. Drew Lock, I think, was traded as well. So these teams have kind of moved on. There still are some guys out there, though, because rosters are so inflated. They're just bloated right now, that might be able to get in trade. But we'll touch on that at a later time. Jonas, what's the next thing you want to see at Ravens minicamp?
Not something that we'll be able to get easy information on, but I just want to see, and it also might be misleading, but I want to see just how many 2 tight end looks we get out there. And in this case, Patrick Ricard is considered a tight end just because everything he does functionally is something a tight end in this Ravens offense does. This is still like a period in the offseason where the Ravens are installing stuff. So even if they are, a lot of spread looks, it might not be totally representative of what Todd Monken wants to do. But with them losing Odell Beckham, with Nelson Aguilar getting older, with Devontez Walker still finding his way in this offense, and then you have 3 or 4, at least 3 really good tight ends in Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, Patrick Ricard. Is there going to be an urgency from Todd Monken to emphasize that more in the offense? I mean, you look at last year, Ravens were 47% in 11 personnel, and that's 1 running back, 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers. That's the dominant league meta for NFL offenses, but it was the 4th lowest in the NFL. They were in 21 personnel, which is 2 backs. And in this case, it's usually Patrick Ricard and a running back and a tight end 25% of the time. In 12 personnel, which is 1 back, 2 tight ends 12% of the time, and then 20 personnel, which is 2 backs, 0 tight ends 9% of the time. So a lot more heavy looks than a lot of teams around the NFL, but still they were, for all intents and purposes, a 3 wide receiver formation dominant type of offense. And you wonder, is that going to change this year with Patrick Ricard being more healthy during training camp this year than he was last year? Last year he was coming back from hip surgery. The offense was dramatically more successful with him on the field than without. With him on the field, 0.11 EPA per play, which is really, really good. Without him, 0.0 EPA per play. That's just kind of middle of the road. It's a pretty stark on and off split for a guy that you don't really think is being as essential to this offense as, a Zay Flowers or Mark Andrews or, last year Keaton Mitchell. But when Patrick Ricard was on the field, they could do a lot of different stuff, not only running the ball, but pretending to run the ball and, getting good looks on play action, just because you have to, align your defense differently to account for the possibility of a 290-pound blocker just, messing stuff up for you. So I'm really curious to see just how much during minicamp Todd Monken leans into the idea that this might be a different kind of offense than we saw last year, a little bit more heavy. And that's something that I think fans have pretty strong opinions upon. Like, they want more speed on the field so that Lamar has more space to run. But on the other side of it, you could say if you get heavier bodies on the field, then there are slower defenders on the field, and that will help Lamar as a runner himself. So a lot of philosophical arguments at play, and I'm just not sure exactly how the Ravens feel about this big picture.
If they wanted to add more speed onto the field, they might want to put fourth-round rookie Devontez Walker on the field more often than maybe Isaiah Likely, just as a quote-unquote field stretcher. But what I want to see from training camp is just how good Devontez Walker looks, because we know he lacks a lot of polish. And to also put in perspective, I was just putting in perspective Devin Leary as a 6th-round pick, Devontez Walker as a 4th-round pick. I think that there are a lot of people that are looking at his UNC tape, looking at his highlight reel, looking at his size, his speed, and projecting. But it is also important to keep in mind that he fell to the 4th round for a reason. And 4th-round rookie wide receivers tend to not make a massive impact. They certainly don't become wide receiver 1 on their team very often. There were 3 wide receivers taken in the 4th round of the 2023 draft. Tyler Scott by Chicago, Charlie Jones by Cincinnati, and Darius Davis by the Chargers. Do you want to guess how many receiving yards they combined for in their rookie season? Those 3 players. I have it blocked out on there. Don't try to read it.
720.
No. 298.
Oof.
Yeah. Less than 300 yards for 3 players.
But Charlie Jones did return a punt against the Ravens for a touchdown.
There
I
you
do
go.
believe.
I mean, if Devontez Walker is doing that, then sure, that's worth a 4th-round pick. But the ideal outcome really for Devontez Walker would be Romeo Doubs for the Green Bay Packers 2 years ago was drafted. He's been really good. He had 425 receiving yards as a rookie. 4th-round rookies, just in general, wide receivers or otherwise, tend to not make a big impact. So I think it's important to keep in mind that he is not going to definitely step in and have a 500-yard rookie season. There are going to be some growing pains here. And that's why I think the wide receiver group is going to be lesser than it was last year unless the Ravens make another move here. And it's just fair and I understand the gamble that they made because they are spending more money on Derrick Henry and trying to make this 2 tight end set work a little bit more than it did last year. But you're just going to have to be okay with Devontez Walker going through some pains. But I'm interested to see how he looks at minicamp.
Yeah, I think he's going to be kind of a boom bust prospect in terms of his on-field production through minicamp and through training camp, just because he doesn't yet have that running polish that allows him to really capture all areas of the field. So when we've seen him catch passes in OTAs, it's been on vertical routes. It's been him working downfield against DJ Tampa. So
beating guys, beating guys straight down the field.
Pure gas, pure speed, Mad Max, Devontez Walker road.
Furioso
stuff. So I think when we get to training camp, that there will be some situations where he catches there'll be some days where he catches a couple passes and they go for 30 or 40 yards. And then maybe the next week or so, we don't hear from him at all because, the defense is playing him a little bit better or the cornerbacks know how to defend him a little bit better. And he just doesn't have that ability to kind of snap out his routes and run a dig route or run a comeback route without, kind of picking up his steps like less experienced, less pristine route runners do. So I'm really excited to see what he can do in this offense because I think he has a gear downfield that no one else on this offense does. I mean, I know we all think of Zay Flowers as a speedster, but he was only low 4.4s. Devontez Walker was in the 4.3s. And I think, he has that kind of ability to eat up space as an X receiver or a Z receiver to really make this offense more functional, just, opening up space in the middle of the field by taking that safety, further than he was. So you have more throwing space for a Mark Andrews or Isaiah Likely or Zay Flowers or whoever it is. So I do think his role on this offense is going to be important. Seems like a great kid, have loved listening to him, have loved all the media stuff that he's done so far. But I just don't know what the realistic expectations could be. A guy who at UNC could really only do one thing well, but it was a really, really important thing that he did really well.
We teased it earlier, but Odafe Owe has looked very good. Looked very good at OTAs. What are you looking forward to seeing from Odafe Owe at mandatory minicamp?
Not so much what he does, but who can do it. Who can
stop him?
Who can stop him? Who can block this man? We should mention that minicamp, just like OTAs, not a padded practice. Guys will have helmets on, but not full contact. So I think that inherently gives an advantage to big, strong, fast guys on the edge because you can't really get your hands on their pads and just kind of displace them. So we've seen Odafe the past 2 years now, this year and last year, just be a really big pain in the ass for these tackles to try to block because he can hit him with spin moves, he can hit him with speed rushes, and it's just kind of tough to get your hands on a guy who moves that big and that fast. And I think because of all that, he's going to be a pretty good litmus test for the tackles that are vying not just for the right tackle spot, but can if Odafe Owe tries to go with like a long arm and a more speed to power type move, can Ronnie Stanley take care of him? Can if he's going with more speed, can Daniel Lele take care of him on the right side? Does Roger Rosengarten have enough tricks in his bag to be able to handle a guy who could be a potential 8, 9, 10 sack guy this year as a rookie? So I think he's going to probably embarrass some folks in minicamp this week. So the goal, if you're Roger Rosengarten, Lele, Patrick McCarry, Ronnie Stanley, maybe Josh Jones get some reps at tackle, is just to not get embarrassed by Odafe Owe because I think he's probably the toughest test for these guys. I know Kyle Van Noy had more sacks than him last year, but this is really the type of environment where Odafe can just go ham.
We could see this coming from last year, which is that Odafe Owe is on the path to become another fourth-year breakout for the Ravens, and he is going to hit his stride right as the Ravens are going to have to pay him. I know they already picked up his fifth-year option for next season, so they already have him under contract for the next 2 years, but how many times are they just going to draft a project and he is going to put all of his tools together in his third or fourth year right as the Ravens have to pay this guy? I know that is the price that you pay when you draft at the end of the first round, like they have been doing, but it's just funny because, you want to see a breakout season from Odafe Owe. You want to see him have a Justin Madubuike-like jump in terms of sack production. But he's under contract for 2 more years. So if he is going to be a stalwart on that defensive line, the Ravens are eventually going to have to pay him. But in the meantime, you want to see that sack production go up, and it's not a guarantee. But we'll see.
Yep.
I want to touch on another edge rusher, and that would be Adisa Isaac, the rookie 3rd-round pick, because he has been sidelined with a hamstring injury. We have yet to see him out on the field, but he is going to be an important piece for this depth, just like for the depth on the defensive line and the edge rushers, just like David Ojabo, who we don't know exactly how much to expect from him this coming season after he has had only 5 games in his first 2 seasons. And this is an opportunity now for Adisa Isaac to show that the Ravens don't need to add another pass rusher like they did Jadeveon Clowney last summer, and say that I am enough depth as a rookie 3rd-round pick, because there are guys that are still out there. We know that offensive line is going to be a spot that potentially the Ravens might look to add some depth, and I think edge rusher is another spot.
Yeah, it was interesting to see Roger Rosengarten say last week that he was impressed by minicamp. Maybe a guy we're all forgetting about a little bit.
We've given him some good pub on this pod.
Yeah, but not a whole. I think
we've given him good pub relative to,
other podcasts.
Yeah, well, his name value as well.
I think minicamp will enter training camp on the roster bubble, because I think last year they knew that he could maybe develop into something, and I think this is the offseason to show that he has developed into something. He had some pass rush juice last year, but he's still an undersized guy from Lafayette. Not a lot of guys like that typically, hack it in the NFL for very, very long. So I think you can look at the Ravens edge rush depth and feel somewhat optimistic if you are banking on, a healthy season from Kyle Van Noy, a breakout season from Odafe Owe, a step up season from Tavius Robinson. I think he's done some pretty good things in OTAs. He's just a big, strong guy, and those guys tend to do pretty well, tend to have a pretty high ceiling in the NFL. And if you can get just 1 or 2 more average to above average contributions from David Ajabo or Minicamp or Adisa Isaac, then I think you have to feel pretty good about where the group is. And that's not even accounting for the fact that someone like Malik Harrison is a quasi outside linebacker with everything he does on early downs. So I think it's an interesting group, but obviously we just don't know what to expect from Adisa Isaac because we haven't seen basically any of them. The one time that we got eyes on him at a rookie minicamp, he was just hanging out, chilling, not doing anything because the day before he'd tweaked his hamstring. So he was obviously a guy who was seen as, on some draft boards like a top 50 guy, maybe a potential first rounder. Obviously fell to the Ravens in the third round because some limitations about his ability to bend, not always great against the run. But if he can give them some juice on as a pass rusher, then that will be a really nice find for them on day 2.
Well, we will have a look at Adisa Isaac, hopefully, if he is out on the field, and all of the rest of this 2024 rookie class, as well as all the returning players. And we'll keep you apprised.
But you're not really, you don't really care about the veterans.
I don't care.
You want to see the young boys.
I want to see the young boys out there.
Yeah. This is your Orioles brain. Trade all your Craig Kimbrels.
Yeah.
Bring up the Poviches of the world.
Yeah, where's Connor Norby when you need him? He's doing pretty well with the big.
Save it for the Orioles podcast.
All right. We do have an Orioles podcast, by the way. Jonas is not on that podcast. Banner baseball show. And for good reason. Let me tell you, you're disinvited. I don't know if you're. I've told you, but you're not allowed on that. You're barred.
Barred from the premises.
Yeah, exactly. At Jonas_Shaffer is Jonas's Twitter handle. I'm at Paul Mancano. Please like, rate, review, subscribe. Give us a good review, and I will read it out here on the show. I've done it before. I will do it again. For Jonas Shaffer, I'm Paul Mancano. Thanks so much for tuning into the Banner Ravens podcast. We will be back at some point next week to discuss what we learned here at Mandatory Minicamp. But in the meantime,